Elon Musk discovers his SpaceX employee is homeless. Next day, he changes her life forever. When you think of SpaceX, what comes to mind? Elon Musk, awe-inspiring space missions, or the Falcon 9 rocket soaring into the skies bringing humanity closer to Mars. But there's an untold truth behind every successful rocket launch, the quiet, tireless efforts of thousands of people, those who work relentlessly to turn humanity's dreams into reality. Ethan Carter, 32 years old, is one of them. He's an assembly line worker at SpaceX's Hawthorne, California factory. Every day, Ethan spends hours meticulously inspecting every bolt and every component of the colossal machines, where even the smallest error could lead to catastrophic failure. But for Ethan, this isn't just a job. It's a passion, a mission that he takes immense pride in contributing to. He often tells his coworkers, "Every day I work here, I feel like I'm part of something bigger than myself. I'm not just assembling a part. I'm helping humanity reach for the stars." Under the bright white lights of the factory, Ethan stands out not just for his dedication, but for his team spirit. Whenever the assembly line encounters a problem, Ethan is the first to step in and troubleshoot. If Ethan can't fix it one way, he'll find another, a coworker once said. He's the kind of guy who never gives up. People admired Ethan not just for his skills, but for his positive attitude. Even on the most stressful days, he managed to keep a smile on his face and was always ready to lend a hand to anyone in need. But what no one knew was that behind his cheerful demeanor and unwavering dedication, Ethan was carrying a secret he was determined to keep hidden at all costs. At the end of each shift, when Ethan's coworkers headed home to their families or warm apartments, he also left the factory. But his destination wasn't a home. Instead, he climbed into his old Ford Explorer, parked at a Walmart lot, which had been his home for several months. No one knew that Ethan was homeless. He had no family to lean on, no place to call his own. It all began a few months earlier, when his mother, the only family he had, passed away. Medical bills had drained his entire savings. When his lease ended, Ethan simply couldn't afford to renew it. With nothing but his worn-down car, a thin blanket, and unshakable determination, he told himself, "As long as I don't give up, things will get better." To Ethan, the car wasn't just a shelter. It was the last connection he had to his mother, who had always encouraged him to pursue his passion for aerospace. The car held precious memories, a small box of family photos, a blanket his mother had knitted for him during a long-ago winter. Those keepsakes reminded Ethan that he wasn't entirely alone. To hide his situation, Ethan maintained a strict routine. Each morning, he woke up in the parking lot, carefully folded his blanket, and drove to a 24-hour gym. There he showered, tidied himself up, and put on a fresh set of clothes before heading to the factory. By the time he walked through the doors, Ethan looked polished and greeted everyone with his usual smile. He didn't want anyone to know what he was going through. But no matter how hard he tried, Ethan couldn't escape the unease that crept in each night. Curled up in the back seat of his old car, he would often wake up abruptly to the sound of passing engines or the sharp knock of a security guard. Some nights were so cold that all he could do was pray for the morning to come faster so he could return to work, the one place where he truly felt he belonged. Ethan had been remarkably good at keeping his secret. Not a single coworker suspected that the man with the warm smile and unshakable positivity was living in such difficult circumstances. But life has a way of catching up to us, and for Ethan, it took just one small mistake to change everything. The secret he had worked so hard to protect was about to come to light, and the person who uncovered it was none other than Elon Musk. Behind the image of a dedicated and cheerful worker, Ethan Carter was struggling with a harsh reality that no one at SpaceX could have ever imagined. Every day, he walked into the factory with a smile on his face, ready to tackle any challenge. But when night fell, Ethan's life transformed into a very different journey. It all began to unravel a few months earlier when his mother, the only family he had left, passed away after a long battle with illness. Ethan had done everything he could to care for her, even exhausting his entire savings to cover medical bills. But despite all his efforts, he couldn't save her. Her death not only took away the person Ethan loved most, but also plunged him into financial turmoil. Unable to afford the rent for his modest apartment, Ethan had no choice but to pack up his belongings and leave when the lease ended. His old Ford Explorer, the only thing his mother had left him, now became his makeshift home. The car wasn't just a shelter, it was a treasure chest of memories. In the back seat, Ethan kept a small box containing family photos, a blanket his mother had knitted for him during a bitter winter, and a letter she had written before she passed away, reminding him never to give up on his dreams. Despite the harshness of his situation, Ethan refused to let himself give up. Each morning, he woke up in the Walmart parking lot where he parked his car to avoid drawing attention. In the dim light of dawn, he folded his worn blanket neatly, tucked it into the trunk, and drove to a nearby 24-hour gym. There, he showered, changed into clean clothes, and made sure he looked presentable before heading to SpaceX. By the time Ethan walked through the factory doors, no one could have guessed the reality he was hiding. He carried himself with confidence and energy, ready to join in conversations with his coworkers. He often shared light-hearted stories, skillfully steering clear of anything personal. When asked about where he lived, he would simply smile and say, "I'm looking for an apartment closer to work. It'll save me the commute." To him, it wasn't a lie. It was only part of the truth. But even with his unyielding spirit, life in his car was far from easy. Ethan would often wake up startled in the middle of the night, disturbed by the roar of passing engines or the sharp knock of a security guard checking the lot. On particularly cold nights, not even curling up under his thin blanket could bring him warmth or rest. During those moments, he would glance at the photo of his mother and remind himself, "I have to keep going. She wouldn't want me to give up." Ethan worked hard to maintain a strict routine to keep his spirit intact. After his shift, he often headed to the public library to use the free Wi-Fi. There, he would dive into research about aerospace engineering, his passion, or read up on financial management, hoping it might help him escape his current circumstances. But even with overtime pay, the cost of rent in Los Angeles remained a distant dream. Dinners for Ethan were often nothing more than a small sandwich or a pack of instant noodles bought at a gas station. He counted every penny, saving as much as he could to someday afford the deposit for an apartment. Yet no matter how tight things got, Ethan never let his struggles affect his work. To him, SpaceX wasn't just a job. It was the one place where he felt like he was part of something bigger. Still, Ethan knew that he couldn't keep going like this forever. Life in his car was becoming harder with each passing day. And while he worked tirelessly to keep his secret, he knew there would come a time when it would inevitably be exposed. That moment came on a fateful morning. Exhaustion had caught up with Ethan, and a small mistake revealed everything. His secret was no longer his alone, and the first person to discover it was none other than Elon Musk. It was an unusual morning at SpaceX. The sun had yet to rise, and the parking lot was still shrouded in a misty haze. For Ethan, the previous day had ended in utter exhaustion after a grueling 12-hour shift. That night, he was too drained to drive to his usual spot at the Walmart parking lot. Instead, he parked his car in the factory lot, promising himself he would only rest for a moment. But when he opened his eyes, the faint light of dawn was already filtering through the car windows. Ethan jolted awake, his heart pounding. He hurriedly adjusted his blanket and started the car, eager to leave before anyone could notice. What Ethan didn't realize, however, was that someone had already seen him. Elon Musk, as was his habit, had arrived at the factory early to prepare for his packed schedule. As he walked across the parking lot, his gaze fell on an old Ford Explorer parked slightly askew in one corner. The windshield was fogged, and inside he noticed someone sitting up in a rush. Elon wasn't the type to pry, but something about the scene made him pause. A sense of familiarity struck him as he recognized the face of Ethan Carter, one of the standout workers on the assembly line. He stood there for a few moments, furrowing his brow, trying to piece the situation together. Why would someone as talented as Ethan be sleeping in a car? Elon told himself it might just be a coincidence, but the image lingered in his mind throughout the morning. Later that evening, as Elon was leaving the factory, he unexpectedly saw Ethan again, this time at a nearby gas station. Ethan was hunched over the checkout counter, carefully counting out loose change to pay for a pack of instant noodles and a small bottle of water. A few coins slipped from his hand, clinking loudly against the floor in the quiet store. Embarrassed, Ethan quickly bent down to pick them up, his face flushing slightly. Standing a few steps behind him, Elon silently observed the entire scene. As Ethan turned to leave, Elon stepped forward with a gentle smile. "Good evening, Ethan. Didn't expect to see you here," he said, his calm voice startling Ethan slightly. Ethan looked up to see the CEO standing in front of him. His face flashed with a momentary hint of panic, but he quickly recovered with a polite smile, trying to appear composed. "Good evening, Mr. Musk. I just stopped by to pick up a few things," he replied. Elon didn't press him further. Instead, he bent down to pick up a coin Ethan had missed and handed it to him with a reassuring tone. "Sometimes we all need a little help. It's nothing to be ashamed of." Those simple words seemed to strike a deep chord within Ethan. He nodded his thanks, murmuring a quick response, before hastily leaving, hoping Elon wouldn't dwell on the encounter. But Elon had thought a lot about it. As he stepped out of the gas station, his eyes landed on the familiar Ford Explorer parked in a far corner of the Walmart lot. From a distance, he saw Ethan sitting at the edge of the car door, his head buried in his hands, as if trying to hide the exhaustion and worry he couldn't share with anyone. Elon stopped in his tracks. In that moment, he saw a reflection of himself from years ago. Those nights he spent sleeping on office chairs during Tesla's early days, the times he wasn't sure he could afford to pay the rent. That feeling, the helplessness and loneliness, had never completely left him. And now he saw it in Ethan's eyes. The next morning, Elon arrived at his office with a decision firmly set in his mind. He knew Ethan was someone who took pride in his independence, and any help he offered would need to be handled delicately so as not to hurt Ethan's sense of dignity. Elon thought to himself, someone like Ethan, hardworking, dedicated, and driven by dreams, shouldn't have to endure this kind of struggle alone. From that moment, he began planning how to change Ethan Carter's life entirely. Later that morning, Ethan received an unexpected message from the management office. "Please report to the CEO's office during your lunch break." The phone in his hand suddenly felt heavier than ever. A wave of anxiety swept over him. Why would Elon Musk want to meet with him? Had he figured something out? The thought made Ethan's heart race. He tried to push away his fear, telling himself it was probably just a routine meeting. Each step Ethan took up the stairs to Elon's office felt heavier than the last, the pressure building with every stride. He straightened his collar, took a deep breath, and knocked on the door. "Come in," Elon's familiar deep voice called out. As Ethan entered, he immediately noticed that this room felt different from any other space in the factory. The office was spacious, flooded with natural light pouring in from the large windows, but today, the air inside seemed dense, almost stifling. Elon sat behind his desk, casually flipping through a few documents. But as soon as Ethan stepped in, Elon's sharp gaze locked onto him. "Have a seat, Ethan," he said, his tone calm, though his piercing eyes seemed to see straight through any facade Ethan had carefully constructed. Ethan sat down, his hands instinctively clasping together in his lap. Inside, his emotions churned, a chaotic mix of fear, anxiety, and a faint, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, things might turn out okay. "Ethan," Elon began, leaning forward slightly, "I want to talk to you about something I've noticed." Those words froze Ethan in place. He stared down at the desk, scrambling internally to come up with some kind of explanation. But under Elon's unwavering gaze, any attempt to fabricate a story seemed pointless. "Yesterday, I saw you at the gas station," Elon continued. "And before that, I noticed your car parked in the factory lot. Ethan, I need you to be honest with me. You're struggling, aren't you?" In that moment, Ethan felt as though every shield he had carefully built over the years came crashing down. Keeping this secret had drained so much of his strength, and now, under Elon's sincere gaze, he knew he couldn't hide it any longer. Taking a deep breath, he looked up and, with a trembling voice, said, "Yes, Mr. Musk. I am struggling." Elon said nothing, simply nodding gently to encourage him to continue. And then, like a dam breaking, everything Ethan had been holding inside came pouring out. "My mom passed away a few months ago," I used up all my savings to cover her medical bills and funeral expenses. After that, I couldn't afford to keep paying my rent, and I had nowhere else to go. Ethan paused, staring down at the floor as though summoning the courage to go on. I've been living in my car ever since. But I didn't want anyone to know about this. I'm afraid that if people find out, they'll think I'm weak or that I can't handle my job here. I just need more time, just a little more, to get back on my feet. His voice trailed off, growing quieter with each word until it disappeared entirely. When he finally stopped speaking, the room fell into complete silence. Ethan didn't dare look up, terrified of the expression he might see on Elon's face. But instead of the judgment or disappointment he feared, he heard a warm, empathetic voice break the stillness. Ethan, Elon began, I want you to understand that none of us are superheroes. I know what it feels like to struggle through tough times. I used to sleep in my office during Tesla's early days, unsure if I'd even be able to pay the rent. What you've done, showing up to work every day, staying committed to your job despite everything, is truly admirable. Ethan looked up, his eyes welling with tears. Elon's words weren't just recognition. They were an overwhelming source of encouragement, something Ethan had never imagined he'd receive. But Elon wasn't finished yet. You're not alone, Ethan, he said, his gaze soft and understanding. I don't want to stand by and watch you go through this on your own. I want to help you, but I also understand how much your dignity means to you. So let me do this in a way that doesn't make you feel pitied. Ethan could only nod, unable to find the words to respond. In that moment, he felt an incredible sense of relief, as if the heavy burden he'd carried for so long had finally been lifted. Above all, he felt the genuine sincerity of the CEO he had always admired. The next day, when Ethan Carter returned to the SpaceX factory, everything seemed to go on as usual. A steady hum of machinery filled the air, and his coworkers were busy tackling their usual tasks. But inside Ethan, something felt different. The conversation he had with Elon Musk the day before echoed in his mind, every sincere word, every compassionate look. Ethan wondered, how exactly did Elon plan to help? Was it more than just words meant to lift his spirits? His worry lingered only until midway through his shift, when a notification from management appeared on his phone screen. Please report to the CEO's office at the end of the workday. This time, Ethan didn't feel the same panic as before. Instead, he let out a long breath, steeling himself for whatever was about to come. When Ethan walked into Elon Musk's office, sunlight poured in through the large windows, illuminating the entire room. But what immediately caught Ethan's attention was a large envelope sitting on the CEO's desk. Elon looked up and greeted him with a small, reassuring smile. Have a seat, Ethan. I've been thinking a lot about your situation, he said, his tone gentle but resolute. Ethan sat down, his hands instinctively clasping tightly together. Before he could say a word, Elon slid the envelope across the desk toward him. Inside is enough money to cover the rent for an apartment for a year. I want you to have a safe and stable place to live. Work here is already demanding enough. You don't need to carry this extra burden anymore. Ethan stared at the envelope. His hands trembled as he opened it, and when he saw the amount inside, tears immediately welled up in his eyes. He tried to hold back his emotions, but couldn't. Mr. Musk, I don't know what to say. It's too much. Elon smiled and gently interrupted him. No, Ethan, this isn't charity. It's an investment in your potential. People like you, hardworking, dedicated, and relentless, are the reason SpaceX achieves great things. I just want to give you the opportunity to focus on your work and the future you deserve. Ethan lowered his head, his voice breaking with emotion. I promise I won't let you down. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. But Elon wasn't done. His expression grew more serious as he continued. Ethan, I want to do more. I've nominated you for SpaceX's Advanced Technical Training Program. It's one of our core initiatives designed to develop talents like yours. And the cost, the company will cover it in full. I want you to be a part of it. Ethan looked up, his eyes wide with surprise and emotion. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. This was a dream he had never even dared to imagine. Sir, I don't know what to say. I don't think I deserve this. Elon leaned forward, his voice warm but resolute. You absolutely deserve this, Ethan. Not just because of your abilities, but because of your perseverance, your determination, and the faith you've poured into your work, even when your life was at its hardest. Consider this an opportunity to prove to yourself that you're capable of more than you ever imagined. Ethan nodded, unable to find the words to respond. But inside, a new fire had been lit. It wasn't just gratitude. It was determination. He silently vowed to himself that he would not waste this opportunity. As he left Elon Musk's office, the envelope clutched tightly in his hands. Ethan's heart swelled with emotion. He knew that from this moment on, his life had turned a new page. This wasn't just about escaping homelessness. It was about seizing a chance to reach for his greatest dreams. That evening, Ethan drove off in search of a small apartment near the factory. For the first time in months, he felt true hope, and more importantly, he no longer felt alone. He knew there were people who believed in him and were willing to support him, not out of pity, but because they saw his worth. In just a few short weeks, Ethan Carter's life had completely transformed. From long, cold nights curled up in his old Ford Explorer, he now lived in a cozy apartment just a few minutes' drive from the SpaceX factory. Holding the key to his new home in his hand, Ethan felt as though he had stepped through a door of hope, not just to a place to live, but to a fresh start. Each morning, Ethan woke up to sunlight streaming through the window. He brewed a simple cup of coffee, sat at the small desk in his apartment, and spent a few quiet moments reminding himself he hadn't just survived his struggles, he had conquered them. He'd been given an opportunity, and now he was determined to use it to reshape his future. SpaceX's advanced technical training program was no easy feat. Ethan entered the classroom with a mix of nervousness and determination. The in-depth lectures, high-precision practical exercises, and the constant pressure to excel meant many late nights spent studying. But Ethan never let himself feel discouraged. Each day, he reminded himself, "I've made it through my darkest days. There's nothing here I can't handle." His colleagues in the program quickly noticed there was something special about Ethan. Not only did he work tirelessly, but he was always willing to help others. He's the kind of guy who lifts everyone's spirits, even when the assignments get really tough. One classmate remarked, "Ethan understood that success didn't come solely from personal effort. It was also built on teamwork and mutual support." Several months later, Ethan graduated from the program with outstanding results. He was promoted to the position of senior technician, a dream he never thought he'd achieve back when he was living in his old car. On the day he received his new employee badge, Ethan stood in the middle of the SpaceX factory, gazing at the machines he once assembled small parts for. Now, he was the one overseeing the entire process. That day, Elon Musk personally congratulated him. "I knew you could do it. But Ethan, this is just the beginning. I believe you can go even further, not just in your career, but in your life." Those words became a guiding light for Ethan. He worked not only to excel in his own role, but also to create opportunities for others. He began participating in programs to support new employees, sharing his experiences and helping them find the motivation to overcome their own challenges. For Ethan, his journey wasn't just about himself anymore. It was about how he could pay it forward, just as Elon Musk had done for him. One day, Ethan stood on the launch pad watching a Falcon 9 rocket prepare for liftoff. Pride swelled within him like never before. His eyes sparkled as he looked up at the sky, where the rocket would soon soar, carrying not just the dreams of SpaceX, but also his own. He smiled and whispered to himself, "I made it, and this journey is just getting started." The story of Ethan Carter is not just about a man overcoming hardship. It's a testament to how a single act of kindness, no matter how big or small, can transform an entire life. Elon Musk's compassion didn't just help Ethan escape his struggles. It gave him the belief to dream bigger and the chance to turn those dreams into reality. Ethan's journey is a reminder that even in the darkest moments, if we refuse to give up and remain open to receiving help, the light of hope will always be waiting for us somewhere. What about you? Have you ever experienced a moment where someone's kindness changed your life? Share your story with us in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss more inspiring stories like this. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.